Hello, and welcome to As the CMMC Churns. I'm Matt Titcomb, the CEO of Peak InfoSec, an authorized C3 PIO, and I'm also a CMMC Provisional Assessor. Today's episode is NIST SP 800-171 does not equal NIST SP 800-171A. Couple things to be aware of. One, this is completely unscripted from here on in, so expect screw-ups. That's just part of life. Today's conversation, we're going to be talking about this. This is such a great meme somebody made on the internet. It's absolutely adorable, frightening, and scary. And especially in this blown up view, hopefully you're seeing this on full screen, particularly evil. You'll notice that little girl, pause now, is grinning as she runs over her younger brother. But this is about what's going to happen when you guys actually start to run in and start to actually evaluate yourselves at NIST SP 800-171A, which is the assessment guide, the real one for how to make sure you're doing 171 compliant. Again, she's evil. We'll talk about her next week. So as we move on, you just get sucked into that video watching that over and over again, the score diving. It's hilarious. Anyway, so the core of this really is ISOO CUI Notice 2020-04. This came out of NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration, in 2020. This is right about the time when we on the CMMC-AB Standards Working Group were starting to write the CMMC Assessment Guide, going back and forth. And NARA wanted to make sure that we knew and DoD knew, like, no, you must follow 171A alpha. That is the guide. So let's walk through this one statement in this one letter that impacted everything. So any entity, that's yourselves, that's us, Peak InfoSec, if we're sitting in as a consultant helping you to get ready, that's us, Peak InfoSec, as a C3 PIO coming in to do a formal conformity assessment. That's DoD, the Defense Industrial Based Cybersecurity Assurance Center, DIBCAC. They follow that. They do follow that. We've been through their audits, so they follow this. Same thing, if DOJ came in, Department of Justice came in to do a False Claims Act review and see if you were actually compliant, they have to follow this. This is the authoritative guide. This is the Bible. This is whatever you want to call it. When it comes down to it, this is the source of truth. Now, DoD came out with the CMMC assessment guides. CMMC assessment guides cannot weaken, undercut, or change this. They can strengthen and enhance. That's all they can do. And they don't. They pretty much mirror this. They've added some supplemental text, sometimes adding confusion, but that's DoD. All right? So when we think of NIST SP 800-171, there's 110 requirements. 171A has 320 assessment objectives. So yes, you will be evaluated against 320 assessment objectives. And you really must go down to this level of detail. And let's talk about that. So here's the new one for this is the 171A multi-factor authentication assessment objectives. Now, let's talk about that very first one, 353 alpha. New requirements do exist in the assessment objectives you do not see in the language of actual core requirement. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We'll come back and talk about verbs in a couple episodes here and want to explain why you need to worry about ones like this one here, because these are the ones that will trip you up. Now, likewise, all assessment objectives must be met to pass the requirement. So if you meet 3 out of 4, you fail the requirement. You fail your assessment. And maybe get a poem out of it. We'll see what DoD comes out of that one. So just again, you've got to pass all 4 requirements to meet this requirement. And then this applies to all system components and scope. What do you mean? Well, let's talk about that. So the applicability of the requirements, as it's known from 800-171, says that NIST 800-171, the 110 core requirements and the 320 assessment objectives apply to all components of non-federal systems. That's your network, your servers, your PCs, your cloud services, everything that store, process, or transmit CUI or provide security protection. So if you're in one of those two components, whether that's a Windows 10 laptop, your Office, your CNC machines, your file servers, you start thinking about where all this goes and what protects it, that's what gets applied. That's your formal scope. Now, don't forget, this also applies to your people, processes, and facilities too. 800-171 compliance is information driven. So we're going to look and see what people and processes are doing and then where that that CUI flows. That's how an audit works. So don't think just IT. Think bigger and be ready for it at that 171 alpha level. Now, when you start going through your head, you started hopefully mentally creating a list of components that make up your system. Well, again, let's go back to multi-factor authentication. We've got the core requirement here. It breaks down into this one here, which is basically an administrative. You need to be able to tell me that you can identify where privileged accounts are. Then there's 3 technical ones. Have you actually implemented multi-factor authentication for 3 different particular use cases? Now, best practice, we throw in a 4th use case, which is basically do multi-factor for local access for non-privileged accounts. That's a larger conversation we'll skip now. Here's the problem. Remember that list of system components you had in your head? Yeah. You've got to make sure you've got these going across for each one of these. So that privileged accounts. Oh, well, yeah, I've got Active Directory. That covers everything. Really? What about your firewall? Is it tied to Active Directory? What about your admin account on the firewall that's not tied to Active Directory? Oh, are you doing Active Directory sync to Office 365? No, that's a separate account. So, okay, so now we got to, which one's your privileged accounts there? You start seeing. Then have you done MFA on each of these system components? Now the problem is, if you miss one of those system components, the related assessment objective is non-compliant, and then your overall MFA requirement is non-compliant. Again, worst case scenario, crap really does run uphill from the bottom up. So understanding that when we start looking at 171A and how we're assessing against the 320 assessment objectives against your system components, yeah, this starts getting complicated and hard. Sorry, it's not easy. Information security has never been easy, but you need to be ready and you need to understand this. So we've got a special guest. We've brought in Jeff Foxworthy. Well, not really, just his image. So let's walk through this. You know you might be about to be run over by 171A if you don't even know what a 171A is. If that's the case, go take a look at it, go start reading it, and if it's still confusing, reach out to us. We can help you with that. You don't make your consultant use 171A. When somebody's coming in to evaluate you, you should follow 171A. Now, for many organizations that are just getting started, we'll do 171 and educate them at that level and walk them through it, but we're checking against 171A when we're going through your evaluation. Now, likewise, if you're not having somebody that even is a consultant that knows 171A, and you don't know what 171A is, get ready to get run over. Sorry. If you've got a governance risk and compliance tool and it stops at the requirement level, you're going to get run over by 171A. Too many of these apps don't go down to the assessment objective level. You need to measure yourself there. You don't evaluate your conformity at the assessment objective to system component level. Again, does your firewall meet all 320 assessment objectives that are applicable to it? If they don't, and it's in scope, you're probably going to get run over by 171A. Lastly, if you don't fix crap at the assessment objective to system component level, you're going to get run over by 171A. Let's go back to that firewall. Your firewall is required to have a notice of consent banner. Your firewall is required to do MFA. If you don't evaluate it at that level, you're not going to know it, and you're not going to go fix it. Then if you don't know to go and fix it, you're never going to add it to your POEM, you're never going to get it resolved, and we're going to come in and find these things. You don't want that to happen. So again, don't get run over by 171A. She's evil. We'll talk about her next week and who she probably more likely represents. And you won't like that once we have this thread. So again, I'm Matt Titcomb. Thank you for joining us for As the CMMC Churns, and we'll see you next week.